Thank you. Okay, yeah, so my name is Maxim Koretskyi. I'm also known as the Wizard. I think that is because I really like to write and talk about some pretty complicated stuff, confusing stuff, and maybe sometimes they can be viewed even as mysterious. So, hence the name, the Wizard. So, I'm just wondering, how many of you here work with Angular? Can you? Okay. Oh, right. Okay, seems to be the right audience. And how many of you know that Angular uses zone.js? All right. Yeah. Cool. Right. So that is why you're here, I suppose, right? Yeah. So Angular has been using zone.js ever since it came out. So zone.js has brought automatic change detection to Angular, and we will see today how it does it. But zone.js also has some drawbacks, and it's been a source of some confusions. And I think it is a mysterious topic, so it sounds right up my alley. So this is what we will be talking about today: Angular and zone.js, and how to use Angular without zone.js. Okay, so probably you can guess that I work for AGGrid, right? Not clear. I have this logo there and here. Yeah, I'm a developer advocate. So at AGGrid, we implement the best JavaScript data grid in the world. So if you need data grid, definitely give it a try. And I'm also the founder of Angular and Depths community. It's not only me, so it was in the beginning, but today we're a big community of awesome people who do a lot of work, a lot of research to write these complicated, yeah, they are complicated articles for people who want to hurt their brains, but become better developers. So it's a good place for you to check out. And I want to say a few words about myself. I've already said a few words about myself, but just a quick pass. So I'm a big fan of 100-hour work weeks. This is something I'm criticized for sometimes, that it's not healthy to work that much. But if you're willing to do that, let me show you how fast you can move, right? So I just started programming in 2014. It was just 5 years ago. I don't have a CS background. So I had a startup. I had to learn a lot, had to learn how to program. Startup failed, as it sometimes happens. But because I learned how to program, I started taking part in Stack Overflow. I answered more than 1,000 questions. So again, put a lot of effort. I gathered enough information to start blogging in 2016. That's how Angular and Depths started. And because of my writing activities, I got invited to speak at NG Vikings. This is actually the first conference I got in last year. Ever since I've spoken at NGConf, Angular Connect, all the biggest conferences. And because of my speaking and writing activities, I got this amazing job at this amazing company, AGGrid. So I'm pretty happy with myself and how it all worked out. So if you're still thinking whether you should work hard or not, well, maybe it's something for you to consider. And here's the article I've written, so you can go ahead and see the past. Okay, so today we'll be talking about zone.js. And I want to start with talking how things are today. And I want to start with this simple Angular component, right? We have just one rendered value that we display in DOM, and when we click on a button, we increment this value, and we render that in the DOM. Okay, so I will do a little bit of live coding. So this is the component. Here's the component in my WebStorm. And here's the code, right? So what should happen if I click on the button, right? We need to see the updated value. Okay, so, okay, yeah, it's, it's not updating, right? So let's see if there's, okay, there are no errors. And there are no errors. This is bad, right? We all know that if we don't see the result and there are no errors, this is very bad. And so, okay, what do you think could go wrong here, right? Why is DOM not being updated? Well, there are a few options that we can consider. The click handler is not being executed for some reason. I don't know. We didn't bind correctly to the this button, and because the click handler is not being executed, the local component state is not being updated, so there's nothing to render, no new value. The other thing, which is tricky, is change detection isn't running. So the click handler has executed, but Angular doesn't render it for some reason. And the third option is things don't work out at conferences, right, with live coding. So this can be anything. But because I'm a responsible guy, I made sure this is not the case. So we can rule it out. And we can test. We can start with the click handler, right? Let's see if click handler is executing. So it's easy. We just go here, just put a breakpoint, just log it, okay? Handler, right? And see if it's executing. So we will update, we click on the button. Right, so you should see that the handler is logged. Okay, so the handler is being executed. So the other option is change detection is not running. And how do you check that? It's actually a pretty complicated question. And in the past, I had a few cases where I had to check if change detection was running or not. But there's no easy way, so let me show you the hard way. What do you need to do? You need to go and find the factory created for this component. So let me show you how to do that. You go here. You need to find, so you go to sources and you need to find ng folder. This is the folder where all the compiled code goes from Angular compiler. Here, we will find our component, which is called app component ng factory. All right, let me close this. And this. So this is the code generated for Angular. And here we need to find the last function. This is the function. It's called, oh, okay, like this, right. The function is called update renderer. There are some articles that I've written how it works and what it does, but basically the main thing is the function is executed during each change detection cycle. It's being executed a lot. So we can expect that if we put a breakpoint here, and change detection is running, the code should pause here. So let's do that. Okay, you can see I'm clicking on it. So change detection isn't running. That's the problem. And how is it possible that there's no change detection? Right? Okay, that is the question. The thing is, you could disable zone.js in Angular starting from version 4. So you can say, Angular, I don't need zone.js anymore. Just keep in mind, not disabling change detection, disabling zone.js. How you do that? You just pass in ng-zone node operation to the bootstrapping code. And this is what I did, right? I intentionally disabled zone.js. Here, if we go to main TS, we can see this part. Let me just make it, just larger. Yeah, like this part here. So intentionally disable it. Why did I do that? I wanted to demonstrate that if you disable zone.js, change detection isn't running. Even with UI clicks, even with UI events and using Angular-related syntax, change detection isn't running without zone.js. So it's important to have zone.js there. Well, if we now enable zone.js, so how you do that? Well, you just either remove that parameter or explicitly specify that we want to use zone.js as ng-zone. And if you do that, so we should have, should have working application. So I'll just remove it here. And we go back. Okay, you can see that now the value is being updated. Okay, just to quickly, I want to also quickly demonstrate to you how you can debug change detection in Ivy. This is the new rendering engine, right? There's been a lot of talk about. And I have Ivy here. Just for you, for the future, if you have any problems, in Ivy, you also need to find the code that is generated for the component, but we won't have factories in Ivy. That's a big simplification, actually. That's a good thing. But we also have this ng folder here. You see just the component. And we will have something called template function. Should be, where is it? Yeah, this is it. Like it's easier now because it's just one function. With the previous code, in compiled code, you had a lot of functions. Here's just one function. But the same principle. It will be executed during every single change detection run. So if we put a breakpoint here, we expect now that the code won't be paused, right? Because there's no change detection. But if we go back, just let me go back. Again, remove this part, right? So I've just enabled zone.js again. Go here, we put a breakpoint, just first statement. Okay, so you can see that the code is paused. So change detection is running now. Everything is good. We are happy. And yeah, and that's great. Okay, so now we know that zone.js triggers change detection. And it's important to understand that zone.js is not part of change detection, because I've read a lot of articles that say that zone.js is part of change detection in Angular, which is not true. It is not. And I'll show today that even with disabled zone.js, you will be able to run change detection. So zone.js triggers change detection. How does it do it? I think that you've read, or how many of you have read articles about how zone.js works? Okay, about 30%, cool. Yeah, so for the rest of you, I'm going to explain to you how it does it. So zone.js is a standalone library that patches asynchronous events in a browser. Timing events like set timeout, XHR events. And it knows when a particular event happens, so it can notify interested party when this event has finished executing. So what Angular does, it implements ng-zone. This is the service implemented by the framework that wraps over zone.js and listens to these events, right? In the Angular framework, actually there is a method called onMicroTaskEmpty implemented by the ng-zone, and the rest of the framework, for example, application ref, this is the main service that runs change detection for your all components. It just subscribes to onMicroTaskEmpty, and it just waits. Whenever there is any asynchronous event, it gets notification and will run change detection. Okay, so I also wanted to show it to you, just very quickly, because I like to show code. So what do you need to find? We need to find Angular code, the library code. What is the name of the file I need to search for? Does anybody know? What was the name? Huh? Yeah, vendors, because Webpack usually packs all the libraries, all this stuff in the bundle that is called vendor.js. So I need to find vendor. And this is here, right? Now I can just find empty.subscribe. So here you can see that this is ng-zone, the reference to ng-zone. And this event that I showed you, we subscribe to it. And when the time comes, we just here call this tick. Tick is basically just run change detection for the entire components tree. That's the method that does the magic. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to click on the button, just show you what will happen. Yeah, you see I click on the button, and this is where we stop, right? So the event was triggered by zone.js, which was intercepted by ng-zone. And now the framework is ready to start executing change detection. Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, so this is zone.js. So as we've just seen, zone.js brings automatic change detection to Angular. But as I told you, there are a number of downsides, which here are first, size. So it's a library. We need to package that to the bundle. And so we need to bring extra size to a browser. Because this library needs to patch all synchronous events, it adds time to, it says startup time, right? You need some time to patch all this stuff, do the work before your application starts running. Now, excessive change detection runs. I just told you that zone.js notifies Angular after every single event. So you might have a lot of change detection cycles, even though you might not need them. And this is probably most of you have faced, right? It's hard to debug when you have the stack trace like this with all zone.js internals. This is confusing. So in conclusion, zone.js, although it is a good thing, and I think it's a great idea, but it slows time to interactive, and it also makes application harder to debug. So what are our options in the future? The functionality that you can use today already is manual change detection. So you're saying, I don't need zone.js, I don't need it to be change detection to be automatic. I know myself when I need to run change detection, right? And you probably know that. So to do that, we need to inject change detect ref. How many of you already done this? Oh, probably from Stack Overflow answers, right? That's how it works. Maybe some of my answers, I don't know. Yeah, so we inject it and we call detect changes manually, and we're on. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to show it to you here. So what I will do, I will disable zone.js again. Then I'll go here, just make sure it doesn't work. So zone.js is disabled. Then we will go to app component and we will inject this thing, private. Yeah. Okay. So what is, no worries. It's something called tslean. I have no idea, but it's always gives some errors. What we need to do now is, after we update the state, we need to say, okay, Angular, I've updated the state that is important for DOM. So just render it, right? And I will call detect changes. Okay, all right, it's working. I got lucky, yeah. So interesting that in Ivy, things are going to be a little bit different. We're going to have similar function, but you no longer will need to inject it. You can just import it. And yeah, I will enable it again. I'll just show it to you. So we just import that function. This is it. Detect changes. So this is like a standalone function call. You just need to pass in a component instance, and we'll run change detection for this component. And what's important, it will run change detection for all, let me just hide it, for all its children. So you can see we're importing the int function. We are not injecting it in the constructor like a service. So it's just a standalone function. And yeah, I'm calling here the function. There is this symbol here. It just means that the function is private. You're not supposed to use it. Yeah, but who knows? Who cares, right? We are hackers here. Yeah, well, anyway, I expect it to be public API. Or maybe it is already a public API because this talk was prepared like a month ago. So maybe they will make it public at some point. So just to, okay, it's working, great. So now we have two APIs in the current view engine and in Ivy, detect changes that will run change detection for the current component and all its children, okay? The problem is that it runs it immediately. So if you have 5 change detection calls, detect changes calls in 5 components, you will have 5 change detection runs, which is not ideal. What you would rather want is to say, I want to run change detection later, right? Once all my application code has finished executing. And in current view engine, unfortunately, there is no way to do that. We have something called mark for check, but it doesn't schedule change detection. So if you don't use zone.js and just use mark for check, you won't have change detection. Right? Whereas in Ivy, we are going to have something like that. The tentative name is mark dirty. So you pass a component instance. You use it similarly to detect changes. You pass a component instance, and what it does, it doesn't run immediately change detection, but it schedules a change detection run in the next VM turn. So we expect all our application code to finish executing in the current virtual machine turn, right? So it's safe to say that in the next VM turn, all the changes have been applied, so just safely render it to the DOM. And for those who worked a little bit with React, this is how set state in React works. You schedule the reconciliation process, so it will be similar. And it's a great, great API. Okay, but what I've just described to you, this is manual change detection, right? We need to do it manually, and we need to know our tools, so we need to spend more brain power, and not something we want to do, right? We just want it to be automatic. And this is where things become complicated. When somebody wants to do our job, or we want somebody else to do our job, things become complicated, right? Same thing with this framework. So when I started thinking about that, my first thought was, okay, because we use Angular-related or Angular-provided syntax to bind to events, particularly UI events, right, like click. So the framework already knows that we want to bind to an event, so probably whenever there's a click handler, an event happens, we want to have change detection scheduled automatically, right? So this was reasonable thought. And actually could have been easily implemented because this click syntax is converted. This is new Ivy engine code where they use instructions. So the binding to event is translated to the listener instructions. Just listen to an event. And there is a callback. So the compiler could easily inject mark dirty into this compiled code, right? And we would have noticed that, and we would have automatic change detection for UI events. There is a problem, however. Although we all agree that we probably need to have change detection run after the click event, this is not the case with mouse move, right? Just if we would have a change detection run after every single mouse move, which can fire 1,000 times in a second if you move a mouse pretty fast, right? We would have very, very slow application. So the framework in this case would need to provide an escape hatch, something like this, like no mark dirty. And this is hypothetical. There is nothing like that. But you can realize the problem here. Sometimes, because there's schedule, right? You need to move fast and break things. You may forget to include this no mark dirty. And then what would happen, the framework or the application will become very slow, right? Because it will fire so many change detection runs. And again, as often happens, we can say that this is not our fault. This is bad tool, a very bad framework. It's so slow, right? So we don't want that, and people who work in Angular don't want that too. So this option was rejected. A better alternative that was suggested is automatic change detection through centralized state management. Most applications today use some kind of state management library, probably NGRX, right? This is the most common, I think. So the idea is, if you use state management and you already inject store in your components, so you're already working with it, why not come up with a function that could bind part of the store to component inputs? Let's just tie them together, link together, parts of a component state and inputs from a component. And so again, this is hypothetical. This is not something that already exists, but this is what came up during discussions with the team. So suppose you have a connect function. And this function takes a component class and the mapping between a component state, between a component inputs and global state, part of global state. So here's an example. There's a component called to-do list, and there's inputs, to-dos, right? And now, when we call connect, the function connect, the first parameter is component class, and the second is configuration options. What we're saying is, I want to map to-dos input to, you pass in a selector function. You're saying that bind it to, so when the state dot to-dos change, I want the NGRX module to update inputs on a component. And as you probably all got used to on push stuff, right? When we have input bindings change, Angular runs marks for check and runs change detection. So here's the same logic. Whenever part of the state changes, the NGRX library updates inputs and schedules change detection run. Yeah, so that's pretty good solution. There are, of course, problems, like trade-offs, like with everything. If you're not using this library, right? What do you do, right? This is the first trade-off. The second trade-off is that even if you're using the library, this will only work for the data that is stored in global store, right? But you also have local component state. So for this, you might need to use manual change detection still. All right. So what we've learned today is zone.js is required to schedule or to trigger change detection after synchronous events. Zone.js is not part of change detection. Angular, your application can work without zone.js. The options are, the first one that is already working today is manual change detection. Detect changes and mark dirty calls, right? But it's tedious, it's manual, you may forget about it. It's not something we Angular developers got used to, because from AngularJS, the idea was that all the rendering part would be automatic. So this is easier for React. They said you need to call set state manually, always. So then the other option that I considered, which was rejected, is automatic change detection through some internal syntax mechanisms. But because it's implicit, right, you not directly control it, you need to have some version of an escape hatch to prevent change detection, which is not good. And the better version, which there's great chance that it will come true, is automatic change detection through some state management library like NGRX. The biggest benefit is that it's opt-in. So you yourself connecting components to parts of the state. So you know for which components you will have automatic change detection and for which you won't. But it only works for global states, so there are some options being discussed how to maybe improve this mechanism. Okay, which approach do you like? So if you find me somewhere here in the hallway or later, I will be somewhere talking to somebody, so you can find me there. And we can talk about it. This is the t-shirt I used to wear. I no longer wear it, so you won't be able to find me wearing this t-shirt. A few articles I've written. They still exist. They still exist. That's a good thing. So if links don't work, just go to Angular in depth. You'll be able to find them. They are, the reverse engineering part is how I approach debugging source code and trying to figure out how it all works. Change detection in Angular, it's an overview of the mechanism, and ng-zone and change detection, basically what I've just described. I'm also organizing the first Angular conference in Ukraine. It's a great country. So I don't know if you're somewhere nearby, happen to have some extra money, just come to the conference. Yeah, the idea is to make it super technical. Like if you feel that there is not enough stuff that hurts your brain, you need to go to that conference. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I used to be very active on Twitter, but I'm no longer there. But you can find me there and follow me. And yeah, and this is a great picture. Right. There is actually an idea here. I hope that what you've learned today, what I've described to you guys, has awakened your curiosity to learn more, to start digging into all that hard stuff. And by doing so, I believe that you will be able to reach new heights every single day. And I want you all guys to be extraordinary engineers. So thank you for your attention. Good luck.